Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Kind of a short show this week. Nothing really much to discuss. I mean, there's nothing
Things
really
got better.
Just way better.
Yeah.
It turns out AI did solve all the problems.
Everything.
I was really skeptical of the techno-utopists, but here we are in a Keynesian kind of utopian, sort of, I don't know what the opposite of a hellscape is, a heavenscape, where we're all just working 15-hour weeks and indulging our creative desires and writing poetry and, just blowing each other. It's great. So this will probably be the last episode of the Unnatural Selection podcast. Probably don't need to do anything after this, given that the world's fixed. So...
yeah, we really do. We ought to eat our hats over the whole AI thing. It really did fix all our problems.
Solved everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not. That was a lofty not joke that we were going for there. Yeah, no, it turns out everything's terrible and the world's just slowly sliding into authoritarianism, which is sick and cool. So you might have learned this is a news and politics podcast, which... aims to be comedic, but might just incite anxiety today. And that's fine. And that's okay. So, first up, top story, creeping fascism news. The FBI is being purged.
Oh.
Love a good purge. And when you say purge, we're of course talking about the hit TV and fan fiction, a story where there is a night where everyone goes out and murders everyone for free. You can't get prosecuted. That kind of purge.
We are talking about that, but we're not talking about the movies. We are talking about the reality that now exists in the American government. So the Trump administration this week forced out a number of FBI officials, removing agents who worked on criminal cases into President Trump, as well as the heads of various field offices. A source familiar said agents who had worked on the Mar-a-Lago and Jan 6 investigations were escorted out of the Washington field office. Now, people might remember that the January 6th investigation was one of the largest investigations ever conducted by the FBI. Dozens of agents, thousands of different, pieces of evidence. Obviously, there was lots of people taking photos and live streaming. I think there was 1,500 of those defendants that were pardoned by Trump last week. That are now back out on the streets. There were, dozens of other cases, in progress, which have, since been stopped. So to say that anyone involved with anything to do with January 6th is going to get frog marched out of the premises means that a significant number of just like career officials in the FBI are like effectively fired. Like you're doing your very best to cripple the FBI. This is hot off the heels of Kash Patel's confirmation hearings in the Senate, where he claims to have never met Kash Patel or recognized any of the things that Kash Patel ever said. Kash Patel, meet Kash Patel at all of the things that you said and did, which said things like, I'm going to shut down the FBI day one and turn it into a museum of the deep state. He's going to say, who is this Kash Patel person? I've never heard of him, and I never said that.
Sorry, I thought you'd misspoken there. I was like, you're saying, hang on, Trump is claiming that he's never met Kash Patel before. No. You mean he doesn't recognize his own words.
Kash Patel, it turns out, is a freshly born babe, pure as the driven snow, who was born on the way into his confirmation hearing this week.
Yeah.
So
you're saying
maybe Severance is like
he was 7.
Maybe he's actually just started work on the 7th floor, and he's like, I don't
oh my God, that's such a good sketch. SNL, if you're listening, pick this up.
I was going to say more like he seems to be mirroring the lead actress of Amelia Perez, which I forget their name, but that have been nominated for Best Actress, and now everyone's digging up their old
anti-Muslim
racist,
tweets,
Islamophobic, and just hateful tweets, and then have cancelled everything to say, all this disinformation. It's like they're just screenshots of everything you said.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't disinformation. Just you said it.
It's not disinformation. About it. It's just information.
Yeah, it's just information that you are allegedly only just now hearing.
Yeah. First I've ever heard of this Kash Patel. It's so funny. Like, I don't know why the senators don't be like, hey, Kash Patel, I'm going to ask you a question and ask if you said this thing, but like, here's a cheat sheet for how this process is going to work. Is that when I ask, have you said this thing? It's because I've got you on tape somewhere fucking saying this thing.
it's like RFK went through the same thing, right?
Same thing this week, yeah.
For the health position, just being like, did you not say vaccines cause autism? I don't think I did. Well, I have it on record.
Well,
that
here's
you
the
did,
fucking clip. Here's the Daily Show fucking supercut of you saying all the fucking things that you obviously said, cunt.
Yeah. And I'm just going to pass it to the person who'll make the decision. If you're not going to admit to saying it, I'll just pass the evidence that you said it, and let's move on.
I really wish they would play clips in these hearings. Like, just get a media wall out, just get a TV, and just go, okay. And Kash Patel, did you ever say that you're going to dismantle the FBI? No, I didn't say that. And you go, okay. Clip number 1. If we could just have the clip where he said exactly the thing that he said he just didn't say. How do you respond to that? Like,
I think even better, we need like a QI style like wall behind them that when they say the wrong thing, suddenly alarm sounds go, and a quippy thing has just been typed by someone real fast, is just blasted on the wall. Like, it's like, Kash Patel, did you ever say that? No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Yes,
he did. He absolutely fucking did. He's a psycho.
And then they play the clip.
Anyway, focusing on the FBI. Yeah, so this is, it's bad because there have been senior FBI officials that have gone on the record that have been involved in these terminations that have said, basically that there's been a pause put on, like it was like a document pause that had been put on the cases that they're working on, which generally only happens if you're like being audited or if there's some sort of investigation that's going on into you. The acting head of the FBI, what's his name? Driscoll, Brian Driscoll, basically wrote a memo that said, late this afternoon, I received a memo from the acting Deputy Attorney General notifying me that 8 senior FBI executives are to be terminated by specific dates unless these employees have retired beforehand. So, jump or get pushed. I have been personally in touch with each of these impacted employees. He said in the memo that he had been directed to provide the DOJ by noon on Tuesday a list of all FBI employees involved in Capitol riot cases and also those involved in a case against a Hamas leader. No one contacted by it, NBC News had a sense of the new administration's interest in the Hamas case, but the focus of Jan 6 was clear. The Trump administration apparently believes that all of the Jan 6 cases should not have been brought. Since it was the largest criminal investigation in US history, thousands of FBI personnel were involved, as Driscoll acknowledged in his memo. Quote, we understand that this request encompasses thousands of employees across the country who have supported these investigative efforts, he wrote. I am one of those employees, as is acting Deputy Director Rob Kissane. And basically, he's saying, you need to name names. It's the fucking communist, McCarthy hearings, Reds under the bed. Well, you got to name names of anyone who worked on these cases, and I guess they'll get kisses? Like, what do we think is going to fucking happen here? Like, obviously these people are going to get investigated.
We've got a fruit basket for all of these.
Yeah,
I need to know who to give them to.
We have got so much cantaloupe with the strategic cantaloupe reserve is being released, and everyone's getting a fruit basket.
Melon party.
So, melon party, yes, exactly. So, it's bad. People are getting fired. They're probably going to get investigated. It really does seem like Trump is just identifying anyone who ever did him wrong, and they're going on a fucking enemies list and getting purged.
If everyone at the FBI is getting investigated, who's doing the investigating though, George? That's the question.
Who investigates the investigators? Yes.
Investigator.
In the words of Homer Simpson, Coast Guard.
It is a 5-alarm fire, like a fascist 5-alarm fire that members of the intelligence services are being frog marched out the door because of doing their jobs, which is to investigate crimes, because they fell on the wrong side politically. Like, as far as I'm aware, like, I don't know, maybe the Civil War, that's the only time that something like this has ever happened in US history, where career bureaucrats are being targeted politically en masse for doing their jobs, like, because it fell on the wrong side of the political aisle, right?
The McCarthy
era, or the Lavender Scare, where they were, purging. But this is like, the McCarthy era was like, okay, so they were going after communists or people who were perceived to be communists, right? But it wasn't against like Democrats per se. It was people who, it was an idea. It was anti-American. That was the whole, or that was the auspices that it was done under. Like, we're trying to target people who are anti-American who are living within our ranks who are trying to dismantle our system. It's not like you're on the opposite side of me in politics. Therefore, we're going to crack down on you because you're on the opposite side. It's like Nixon era shit. Like, you're on my enemies list. I'm going to target you with audits, I'm going to ruin your fucking life because you are on the wrong side of the president, right?
Yeah. And in the, I'm no expert on sort of the period, but in the McCarthyism era sort of stuff, it was also while they were the administration and just cracking down on what they perceived as a national security risk, right? Whereas this is, you were not in power and being investigated as a civilian for crimes. And now you're in power and it's revenge.
It's revenge. It's purely revenge. I say it's without precedent.
But
I say it's without precedent. And then we just succeeded in mentioning like several different precedents.
Several different precedents.
But it is extremely concerning doesn't even begin to. Yeah. Like this is like what it reminded me of, what I sent to you guys in the chat was the Night of the Long Knives. Obviously, it was different because those people were rounded up and shot in 1930s era Nazi Germany.
I mean, let's not beat around the bush. Trump would do that if he could get away with it.
If he could do it, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a supermajority of the Supreme Court, so you're like, what, hold this space. Like, we'll wait and see.
Put the Fifth Avenue claim to test.
Yeah, Brett Kavanaugh all of a sudden is really amenable to the idea of shooting people in the fucking head. All of a sudden, I wonder where he saw that in the Constitution. But like,
I mean, Not of the Long Knives is also like an internal. It was against the SA,
internal power struggle. But you understand what I'm saying is your political opponents or the people that you want to get revenge on or get out of the way, are the ones that you're getting rounded up and getting investigated in this case as opposed to being murdered. But
it gets worse, George, because it's not just the FBI that have been purged at this point. So Trump's fury has also reached the Justice Department, where they've removed all prosecutors who worked on his 2 criminal investigations.
Oh, there's internal auditors, which they're not allowed to fire. They've just fired 17 of them.
The auditors.
Yeah.
They've removed, Fauci's, so the former, what was he, the health secretary or something?
Yeah, it was Department of
Chief Medical Officer or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Basically the main guy responding to the pandemic, who was part of Trump's previous cabinet, had his security detail removed despite getting death threats.
He was the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
Yeah. Trump has also now removed Mark Miley or Mark Milley, depending on how you pronounce it. He's removed his security clearance and guard detail. He was a fucking joint chief.
Yeah, John Bolton and people are being threatened by Iran with death threats, saying, we know what you did to our fucking guys. That assassination on Soleimani and things like that. We are explicitly calling you out for death threats. And Trump's gone, man, they can afford private security, can't they? It's like, no, these are state actors trying to assassinate former administration officials, and Trump's just gone and just left them out there without any pants. This is a 5-alarm. The fact that the media isn't screaming all about this all day, every day. I'm not getting breaking news alerts on my phone being he fucking did it. Oh my God, I can't believe it's fucking happening. Is crazy to me. This is a fucking takeover of the non-partisan elements of the government. It is extremely scary.
If according to Heritage, the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 playbook, they are partisan, George, if you listen to that side of the aisle. But of course, I think you've got an article here which describes why the FBI is the most
conservative organization. Yeah. Okay, so this is an article, and we'll post all of these articles in the show notes from the Brennan Center for Justice. Okay. The FBI, the idea that the FBI is woke or infected by DEI and all that sort of shit.
Woke, a word that's lost all of its original meaning.
Just no meaning whatsoever.
Yeah, it's sick of hearing that word, by the way. It's other terms that are described that are sort of it's almost like the N-word to some extent.
I literally feel like saying, just say the N-word, because that's what you mean. It's just anyone who's black, anyone who's gay, and you just want to say the disgusting, gross people that are in the out group that we don't like. Yeah, those are the people that we're doing. So if anyone's got any job of any level of seniority, it can't be because it was of competence. It's because of affirmative action and because of DEI that you got hired for that
we
role.
don't like DEI hiring. You mean not hiring white people?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you don't like.
Tell you what, for all these, the idea that the FBI is some kind of like leftist wokerati, like it's complete nonsense. The FBI is a law enforcement agency filled with fucking conservative white dudes who probably voted for this fucking cunt who's getting them out of their jobs. So
your son's out of the house, right?
Yeah, no, he's away. His nap's finished. As of 2022, 78% of agents were white and less than 25% were women. Less than 6% of agents are black and less than 10% are Hispanic or Latino. Almost 82% of FBI executives are white. The Bureau's middling and ineffective efforts to diversify over the years have focused almost entirely on recruiting rather than retention, ignoring how it treats the female and minority agents who successfully navigate the application process.
Amazing. You can say we've hired this many women or this many people of color, but those numbers are pumped up by the fact that they keep resigning because of how toxic it is.
There was in 2019, there was a $22 million settlement for a class action lawsuit filed by 34 women who said that they'd been subjected to sexual harassment, discrimination, and unfair dismissals while training at the FBI. And it's like a series of different cases that the FBI has been taken to court for and lost. and instances where the FBI is completely fucked up on, investigating sexual assaults with, regard to Brett Kavanaugh. And the FBI as an organization is thoroughly white, thoroughly male, thoroughly conservative. If this is what the woke FBI looks like, I can't imagine what the fucking Gilead FBI looks like that Trump wants to bring about. I really don't understand
what the right-wing FBI looks like.
The right-wing FBI has a name. It's called the FBI.
Yeah, I'd imagine the Trump version of the right-wing FBI looks like, like Scar and all these hyenas in The Lion King. Just all of them goose-stepping around green smoke and fire.
That is that's Quantico. You must never go there.
This is all stuff that was talked about in the Project 2025 handbook.
They told us what they were going to do, and now they're doing it.
Now they're doing it. Yeah.
Trump just missed it at the time. He's like, "Oh no, I'm distancing myself from that." We're definitely not going to do that. But I guess this is part of the point, right? Some of this is definitely, I would say, been directed by Trump because they're targeting people that specifically
individuals,
went after him. Right? It's revenge.
Yeah.
But other parts of this, you've got to imagine the scale of what they're going to be doing. It's as we said, they're much more prepared this time, and they've got a system. They've got people around him. They've got a system in place to affect this.
They're offering buyouts to people in federal government agencies, basically saying, we'll give you 9 months worth of money if you just fuck off now and get out of here, and then we won't have to fire you. Basically, this is happening broad scale across the government at large. Not only are they purging individuals, they're purging the state. Not just the deep state or whatever, sort of conspiracy brain thing comes to mind when you think of that, but just the American state, the departments of everything. They're just, just shedding employees. And the thing is when these economically anxious and definitely not absolutely fucking racist, sexist pieces of shit that voted for this guy, when their government services don't work, when the VA shuts down, when people always talk about how bad the government is, and government's so big and bad and expensive and it's big and bad. But tell you what, when all the shit that you rely on, when the roads shut down, when the meat testing goes away, when the fucking, when all of these things go away, people are going to be really pissed because that is just de rigueur. We expect the government to work. And if you just start shedding expertise left and right, the government's not going to fucking work anymore, which is their point, which is what Project 2025 was all about.
Yeah, to shut it down and replace it with their whatever weird privatized utopia that they're imagining.
I mean, this is the thing. A lot of people, there's this fixation in a lot of these plans, at least from what I've read, around reducing the size of government and getting rid of bureaucracy because bureaucracy stands in the way of efficiency. But no one really talks about how they'll once the resources are gone, the human, the FTE, once that's gone, how do you actually run the thing? Like, what's your process? Are you using AI? Like, do you have
because Adam, because they don't intend to run the government. This is the thing. They don't want anything left to run. They want to hollow these things out so they topple over and fall over on their own, and they're going to replace them with what? Fucking nothing. There is no plan. There is no day after. This is the point, is to kneecap the fucking government like the Turner Diaries, like the fucking race war that takes over the fucking government and kneecaps the fucking government so they can put something else in its place. It's a fascist takeover of the fucking government, and no one's talking about this.
Well, people are talking about it, but they're sort of...
Not enough!
Because going through it, this is the problem, is you're going through the headlines, plane crash, Trump blames diversity somehow for that. They want to send 30,000 illegal immigrants or migrants, whatever, to Gitmo, because that's the most fucked. I mean, I mean, coming from a country that invented offshore processing, basically, I'm like, oh, okay, I can't really talk too much, but 30,000 people, you want to send them to Gitmo, like the place that was fucking renowned for being a torture facility during the War on Terror,
and whose very existence is very dubious at best, in terms of legality.
Abu Ghraib was full. A friend of the show, Polyverse, is writing in, nothing is extreme enough. What MAGA wants is a Gestapo that's only beholden to Trump and his trusted advisors. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing law enforcement agencies turned into Trump-only, loyalty arms of the government. This is, if it was a third world country, if this was a South American country with a leftist leader that was doing this, America would have already invaded in order to install a puppet government. You know what I mean? If this was, the felon, the convicted criminal returns to government, releases the paramilitaries from jail, overhauls the security services and replaces them with loyalists. You know what we'd call it? We call it a fucking coup. We would, this is a takeover of the government.
Remember they did the lazy coup last time. They've had 4 years to learn how to properly do it.
I
just held up 5 fingers then. That was just for emphasis, not for counting. 4 fingers.
We would call it a dictatorship. This is what's happening.
The kind of thing that you would see in... what's the South American country that's done similar things?
Venezuela?
Venezuela.
If this was happening in Venezuela.
Nicaragua or Myanmar
Burma. I don't know which one we call it now.
Oftentimes, it's the US that's behind the fucking coup that's going on.
You'd think, before now, they would have got this down pat. They've caused it in so many other countries.
Well, as John Bolton said,
got it right.
I know from coups, I've done enough of them.
Yeah, it's just crazy. You're right, George, and Adam, what you were saying before of it's not that no one's talking about this, it's that it is being talked about, but in amongst the fire hose of shit of all the other stuff that's going on, apparently stopping $50 million worth of condoms going to Hamas because they're going to build bombs with them was something Trump said. And you're like, what the fuck? And you're not thinking about the fact that they're purging the FBI because condom bombs. I have spent so much this week wondering how condoms could be used to blow shit up. Far more of my brain space than I think is allowed.
I did glance over that. I went, okay. And now that I've given that a second thought, it is crazy. It's the most insane thing.
It's crazy. And it's exactly to distract from what we've just spent the past 20 minutes talking about. And there's a fucking Gestapo being made in the US.
Today, the tariffs went live as well, and he's tariffed his largest trading partners, Canada and Mexico, as well as China.
Yeah.
It's just it's like every day. It's just like, what?
It's just a fire hose. But this is exactly what Steve Bannon said back in the day: flood the zone with shit. This is exactly what, because. And the next story we're going to talk about is that, or one of the next stories, they talk about all the aid that got cut off. They issued this executive order that said all this aid's getting cut off. Everyone freaks out. And I heard someone on, I think it was Rachel Maddow talking about this. So they were saying, Maddow saying it's all good though. We've got, we're resisting and people are kicking up a stink about it and they're turning these services back on. And one of the guests was like, yeah, but the thing you're not thinking about is what are the things that we didn't kick up a stink about? That didn't make the news, and they go, they don't care about that one. We can just leave that one switched off, right? They didn't care about the National Weather Service tracking. Oh, okay, well, we'll just leave that one switched off. Like, it is a stress test. What they're doing is not haphazard in the way that you think it is. It's like, oh, they're just like baboons at the Keys and they don't know what's going on. It's so hectic. They're fucking completely inept. It's like, no, this is a deliberate strategy. It's just pump the zone with shit. Make it so much shit going through every day that you physically can't, you as the media or as a consumer of news, physically can't grab on to the amount of different fucked things that are happening at any one time. So some things will rise to the surface, but other things are going to get completely fucking missed. And that's the strategy. It's on purpose.
And they've got like a gift when it comes to their guy being Trump, because while some other person would probably have to be like coached and grilled into, and like, you know, trained into being able to leak out these kinds of specific bits of crazy to hide the fact that we're doing some other sorts of things. But Trump is his brain is so unique in how it just like spills out information, or the kind of shit that he just thinks is important, or the kinds of responses he'll give to things. Like, they didn't need to prep him for exactly this kind of like distraction.
I don't think he ever gets prepped. I don't think.
They don't have to. They don't have to. Whilst like if you were Adam, if you were setting out to be like, all right, now we need our king for our coup takeover, you'll be like, all right, but now this is the strategy and this is how you do it. They can just put Trump in front of a camera and he will say they diverted condoms away from Hamas for explosives.
If there's one thing that the man understands, and he understands it deeply in his bones, is that attention is currency in the 21st century. And if I can make you think about X and not make you think about Y, then I can do whatever the fuck I want. And Trump has understood that in his bones since the 90s. Polyverse is writing in, insurrections apparently don't matter if you install enough of your own Supreme Court justices. Well, you say that, Polyverse, is like partially as a joke, I think, but it's like, it is true. And we're starting to see, ironically, the first example of this that we've seen is with TikTok. There was a piece of legislation passed by the House, passed by the Senate, signed into law by the previous president, Joe Biden, a day or two before he left, that said TikTok had to be sold, otherwise it was going to be shut down in the US. And basically what Trump said is, nuh-uh.
Well, he extended the deadline.
I've extended the deadline. Now, there is a provision in the legislation which says you can extend the deadline if talks are ongoing with a potential buyer. Talks are not ongoing with potential buyer, as far as anyone has reported. So basically, Trump said, well, it would give me a massive win with young people if I said I was keeping TikTok unbanned. So I'm going to do that.
I heard Microsoft was going to buy it or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen like headlines of Microsoft have thought about it. Mr. Beast is thinking about it.
Yeah, Elon Musk is thinking about it, but like no one's in any kind of like serious negotiating position currently. So what do you do when we get to 90 days or whatever the time period is when it's been extended out to? When Trump says, 90. I'm going to give it another 90. Well, the Supreme Court's going to go, actually, that's unconstitutional. You can't keep doing that over and over again. Like the legislation is clear. And he's going to say, okay, you and what fucking army? And we're going to have a fucking constitutional crisis on our hands over fucking TikTok. Like this is what happens when you have a conservative supermajority and you've got an executive that's emboldened by this unitary executive theory, which means I'm a king, I can do fucking anything. And who's going to try and stop me? He's in a second term. He's term limited. Maybe he decides to go for 3 terms. Who the fuck knows?
There was that thing introduced to the EU. I don't know if it was legislation or just a concept introduced into the Congress or the Senate, which was talking about giving him a 3rd term. Because
he doesn't give a fuck anymore. He's got nothing to lose.
It's a non-consecutive term, so he gets a 3rd one.
Well, it's more like he has plenty to lose. He has going to jail as the potential.
Tom, he's not going to
he's 73. That's what I mean. If he's not president, they can come after him. Like that's why he ran for this second time.
The Supreme Court said he's got invincible king powers now. So no one's going to fucking go after him.
Because he's currently president. That's what I mean. Like if he can stay in power with their precedents of
even
we
afterwards.
Don't pursue presidents.
He's 73 and he's got the diet of a 14-year-old boy. He's going to be dead by the time he's not president anymore. He got away with it. Guys, it's over. It's too fucking late to hold him accountable.
Don't tease me with a good time, telling me he's going to die.
Polyverse says it helps as well when pretty much every social media company has kissed the ring now as well. Yeah, they have. Do you know there's 13 billionaires in the Trump cabinet? I heard that today. 13 billionaires. Okay, the people that are in his
In
cabinet,
the cabinet or the inner circle?
in his cabinet, in his, you know, like
Yikes.
this is an administration that is focused on corruption and graft at like a state level. Like it has become a kleptocracy like Russia. You know,
What are they calling it? A broligarchy?
Broligarchy is the term I heard from Taylor Lorenz recently.
I was gonna say, calling it now. Oh, that's gonna be the word of the year.
Word of the year
I
next
reckon,
year.
by,
Get
like,
ready,
when the
Websters.
dictionaries
Fire
get
up
around
your
to it.
fucking word of the year cannon.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Yeah, the broligarchy. We
But
should
yeah.
really make it the, as I've heard people describe Teslas recently following Elon Musk's Nazi gesture, calling them swastikas, which I think is very funny.
I laugh,
That
but I'm
should be the
also
word of the year.
I laugh, but I'm crying inside.
Yeah.
Amnesty is obviously having an effect on international relations as well.
It's having an effect on my fucking blood pressure.
We talked about the tariffs, but yeah, I mean, one of the other notable relationships that the US has is with Israel, and there is an analysis here done by ABC Global Affairs editor John Lyons, who believes that based on some of the appointments to things like the United Nations, the ambassador to Israel, various other things, that the US, and based on the things that these people have previously said, that the US will basically do away with any support for a two-state solution in Israel-Palestine.
And you know what a one-state solution is called? Occupation.
Yeah.
So
it is called wiping Gaza off the map.
The plan is, as far as I can tell, Israel would effectively annex the occupied Palestinian territories, giving Israel more land and achieving the long-held aspiration of Eretz Israel, or which translates to Greater Israel. Now, I made a joke a couple of weeks ago to you guys. I don't think I said it on the show, but talking about how Trump was talking about how beautiful the territory was in the Gaza Strip and how it's like beachfront property, and his son-in-law, what's his name? Kushner. Jared Kushner was on record on an interview like a year ago talking about how, you know, waterfront property, and talking about it from the perspective of how good it would be to develop this like waterfront property, and like Gaza would be so good if we could just develop it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, why do they keep talking about Gaza like it's Four Seasons Greater Israel?
Yeah.
And the term that they use for this expansion is Greater Israel. Like that was a joke that I made about like how ridiculous it would be to just think about this as an extension of Israel, because it's its own, you know, country with its own government, its own, you know, clear ethnic and religious, you know, its own culture. You know, to just like to be openly talking about ethnic cleansing from Trump is terrifying. That's what they're talking about. If you remove everyone from or integrate them into a one-state solution, or openly talking about pushing them into Jordan and Egypt and all these other places surrounding to get them off the land.
You're erasing a country.
You're erasing a culture. That's called cultural genocide. There's a term for that. That's what it means, to erase a culture. What Australians
genocide isn't necessarily killing everybody.
Yeah, what Australians did to Indigenous cultures here in Australia, many languages that we no longer have, people who are no longer around, that didn't survive, that didn't make it through. There's languages and histories and cultures that are gone, that have been wiped from the map. It's called cultural genocide. It is an ethnic cleansing when you move people of a particular ethnic culture off their land entirely and negate the creation of a state. Like,
to be clear, it's not an official US policy, any of this. It's
they haven't said it out loud
from Trump. But what the evidence that the author of this article is pointing to are the people that they've appointed to some of these positions. So first off, you've got former Arkansas governor and Fox News host Mike Huckabee. He's the new US ambassador to Israel.
The
According
guy
to the Times of Israel,
who's a literal fucking like end of times, like religious zealot, crazy person who believes that the whole area needs to be cleared so he can bring about. This is not a joke. Mike Huckabee believes that area in Israel, in Palestine rather, needs to be cleared so they can bring about the second coming of Christ. That's what he thinks is going to happen.
According to the Times of Israel, Huckabee has said that Israel's claim to the West Bank is stronger than American ties to Manhattan, and even laid bricks in 2018 as ground was broken on a new housing complex in the settlement of Efrat. Yeah. So obviously, for clarity, the West Bank is separate to Gaza, but it's still a Palestinian territory. And for many years now, Israel has been sort of just building houses there. So when they talk about Israeli settlements, it's basically housing developments that have just been put on Palestinian land.
Yeah. John Oliver's show last week tonight had a really good investigation, or like just showing what life was like. It was mainly focusing on the West Bank rather than Gaza, but yeah, to show what that Israeli settlement in these areas looks like. And there was almost like a dystopian science fiction sort of story of literally an above city and an under city with like automated machine guns at checkpoints.
Yeah,
and
all it's
stuff.
missing is the fucking
yeah.
cyberpunk, steampunk aesthetic, and it would be a fucking, video game. Like,
the other nominee is the US ambassador to the UN, so that's Elise Stefanik. She has backed the position of two key leaders of Israel's far right, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. So they're people within the Israeli government. And the Israeli government, as a reminder, is a coalition government that is made up of this Benjamin Netanyahu's party, but the key kingmakers and policy developers and people in that government are hardcore Zionist parties. And that means that they are
not just Zionists, but like far right religious extremists, essentially. Like,
they're not looking for a two-state solution, put it that way.
No.
Those kind of people. So, if you look at
I'm here to create a one-state solution and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
The other thing that we've seen, obviously, everyone's been focusing on the war in Gaza and as well as the war or the conflict in Lebanon. But of course, throughout this time, there's been a whole heap of shit happening in the West Bank as well, where they've either been going in and just looking for quote unquote terrorists, and they've just been leveling Palestinian homes with TNT or whatever, rather than having to go in and search the home. As well as other bits of settler violence, so Jewish settlers, being emboldened to commit their own crimes. So it's a very, in terms of like where is there any hope for the two-state solution? Which, by the way, is the UN preferred. Like that's what they brokered in.
It was up until 10 years ago. Well, not even a couple of years ago, it was the de rigueur position of every Western nation.
Yeah.
That, like, obviously what we're striving for is a two-state solution. And basically Netanyahu's gone, actually, I don't need to pretend anymore. Like, we can just masks off. Like, I actually never wanted a two-state solution. It's always been about fucking occupation, like lol jokes.
Yeah, it's crazy like that, isn't it? Because, it's what the UN has always talked about. Like, Albanese here in Australia, our Prime Minister has always said, like, we're always for a two-state solution while they just kind of let Netanyahu slaughter everybody. Like, you can say you want a two-state solution till the cows come home, but if you're not got to dig your heels in when you're like, hey, actually, you're ethnically cleansing this area.
And while all this is happening, as George pointed out before, the Trump administration has stopped funding put a 90-day suspension on all foreign assistance. That includes the UNHCR.
Yeah, no more condom bombs.
No more condom bombs.
They're putting their foot down.
The US accounts for 1/5 of the UNHCR's budget. So now, and that is the primary organization that delivers aid worldwide. So you think of every
to a lot of places
across 136 countries. Yeah. Most of the world is the beneficiary of these programs, which include AIDS, anti-AIDS medication and prevention, landmines. Fucking like landmine clearing. Right? Like people will die. Kids are going to get their limbs blown off because these programs are paused and people can't get their money. There was a directive that went out that paused money for Medicare, and they go, oh no, we're not actually pausing Medicare, but like if you go to the Medicare website, it's down. You can't, none of these states are able to get money from the Medicare program, which is a federally run program. No one seems to know, it's on, it's off, it's back on again. No one knows what the fuck's going on. Oh, you meant that thing? Oh, that thing is good. No, veterans healthcare, we're going to turn all that back on. Yeah, we didn't mean any of the stuff that people actually like.
And this, of course, will affect, the I guess flow of aid into places like Gaza.
Who the fuck is going to trust the United States ever again? Even if you turn the money back on for these programs, all of these organizations that are running these programs, they're never going to fucking trust you again, because they realize at any time the US could pull the fucking rug out from under them and completely ruin the, like.
That's what they want, though. They want
the chilling effect. They want everyone to be freaked out. But like, you know, if there are things like these are contracts that the government has, okay, or, you know, grants or whatever, like things have been signed that said you get this money on the first of the month every month to run this program. There are things for organizations that are going to go bankrupt because of this, because they don't have the cash flow to just like keep funding their own operations indefinitely until God knows when this thing is, you know, is going to kick back in. People are going to get HIV because the medications that stop them from getting full blown, you know, developing an AIDS a diagnosis based off an HIV infection. Like people will now have, you know, full, you know, a AIDS diagnosis because they didn't have the medication that would have prevented it from going from HIV to AIDS. Like people will die because of this.
Yeah. And so obviously the UNHCR has issued an immediate clampdown on expenditure, including a 90-day delay in ordering new supplies except for emergencies, and a hiring and a contract freeze, a halt to all international air travel. So, yeah, it's having a real effect.
And I don't know what they think this does to like their soft power, because I hate to tell you, like the US doesn't do all of this sort of shit out of the goodness of its heart. It runs these programs and funds these programs because it gives them influence in all these regions around the world. So, you know, people getting drug-resistant HIV because they couldn't get their medications and then, you know, switching them back on, like that's not going to endear you to a lot of these fucking places around the world that are relying on these programs. Like the soft power goes away the minute you start punching people in the fucking face. Like,
yeah, we've talked about that before, and it's something that I guess is part of the whole America First concept, but it's, you know, eventually you do lose. They will have a loss of international sway when they will be, in certain circumstances, outside the tent if they keep continuing down this path. If there are particular global events that happen and people want to start, you know, the people will start to form their own multilateral organizations outside of the US sphere of influence. You know, I think I read something somewhere that you'll have basically a Eurosphere, you'll have an Asia sphere, which is dominated by China.
this is what we were talking about last week.
Yeah, and you'll have your American side of things. So
yeah, it's going to be a multipolar world going on. And people go, oh, okay, well, that doesn't matter too much. Like, why can't each one of these superpowers have influence over their sphere of influence? Like, why does that affect me? Why is that bad? Because it's just, it's worse overall in every respect if big superpowers reckon that they can just bully people in their backyard and there's no Team America World Police coming in to stop things and, like, you know, throw some sanctions on them, or, you know, like if China reckons, oh, I can just take the South China Sea because who the fuck is going to stop me? If Russia thinks I can just take Ukraine because who the fuck's going to stop me? Like it leads to a world that is more conflict ridden, less safe, and more bad for everyone.
Yeah,
because there's no international consequences.
Yes, exactly. There's no consequences for anything. It becomes the 1800s. Everything's just a fucking land grab again. There's no consequences to anything.
But also anyone sitting there thinking like, oh, okay, what's wrong with these superpowers wielding, you know, they wield their influence around. How does that affect me? You realize there's two sides of influence, right? There's the people influencing and then the people who are influenced, which is you. Like if you're not there wondering, if you're the person wondering how, like, why shouldn't just superpowers be able to wield their influence? It means the influence will be being wielded onto you.
Yes, exactly.
Like,
and speaking of influence,
I think it was I forget which comedian it was, Doug Stanhope, who had a joke about the reason that other nations keep themselves informed about America's foreign policy is so they don't become a victim to it.
Yeah.
Because if you like, it's like that's Americans' foreign policy might end up in, you know, bombs on my fucking head. That's what it means, right?
Well, speaking of being affected by America's foreign policy, our future Prime Minister, Peter Dutton.
Don't say it. Don't even.
Definitely.
Not even for lols. Don't say it.
has definitely been looking at the influence of what's going on in America at the moment and rubbing his evil potato hands together.
This is
Yeah.
why. This is why what happens in America is important to what happens here, because you're not just seeing it. Peter Dutton's seeing it as well. And he's going, "Oh, that sounds like a good fucking idea. Oh yeah, anti-trans, anti-woke, anti-immigrants. Oh, that's a good idea. It's working over there. Why don't we try that over here?" All of a sudden,
popular.
Anti-abortion's on the fucking table again. Oh, isn't that interesting? Oh, we don't want to do that. That's unpopular here, unless of course we spend tens of millions of dollars and several months worth of news cycles trying to make it popular again, and all of a sudden we live in fucking Gilead.
Have you been watching or reading The Handmaid's Tale again? You've
I was talking about it recently.
So yeah, I mean, we've talked about it last week that there is a replication of Trumpian style slogans, campaign messaging, and policies that are starting to seep in or have seeped into the coalition policy platform. The start of what we'll talk about today is that, and the most recent one, is that Peter Dutton made a speech the other day where they want to cut 36,000 public servants from Canberra.
They won't do anything to service delivery, I'm sure. That's fine. No, know what? People waiting on the line at Centrelink. They've got it too good. Their calls are answered too quickly. Government's too functional. Let's rip out 36,000 people.
There's a little bit of inconsistency across various members of the coalition as
What?
well. Some people have said, we're just going to slow it down. Some people have said we're going to fire a bunch of people. Some people have said we're just going to have a hiring freeze.
Some people have said, I want the government so small I can drown it in the bath.
And yeah, and they're tying it, like he's tied it to things like Indigenous. He's tied it to a couple of things. So like, and the thing
Watch
is,
Adam try so hard not to say because he's a fucking racist.
So what they're doing is they're tying the concept. So we're going to do this because of XYZ reasons, and some of the reasons they've thrown out are no one in Alice Springs has told me that their lives are better off because of the additional 36,000 public servants in Canberra. And to be fair, yes, there have been 36,000 extra public servants put in Canberra or been hired in Canberra since the Labor government took power. But that's because they were spending something like, what was it, a couple of $billion
on consultants?
Billions per year on hundreds and thousands of fucking consultants.
Yeah, because your old mate, John Howard, spent the better part of 15 years hollowing out the public service, privatizing everything left and right, to the extent to which government couldn't function without the use of billions of dollars worth of consultants telling him what the fuck to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it was mostly the 10 years of coalition governments that did
the
that.
More recent 10 years of it. Although the other
that's when it started with John Howard, right?
Oh, true.
Yeah. I don't have the numbers in front of me here, but from what I've seen reported around as well, that the 36,000 public servants that they want to get rid of, they aren't all based in Canberra.
No.
Like, yeah, a lot of them are in actual, like, not the capital cities of the states. Like, I'm in Townsville and all these other places. Like, yeah, you're not... he's framing it like, oh, we're going to fire all these people in the, the elitists in the Canberra bubble.
Lefty
like,
Canberra fuckheads.
You've got to be getting rid of people from, like, rural areas.
Yeah, well, it's like there have been initiatives from the government to hire in rural areas for the express purposes of giving jobs to areas that otherwise would be struggling economically, like Hobart and Townsville and all these sorts of places. If you just cut 4,000 jobs out of Hobart, which is already a pretty small city to begin with, it's going to fuck the economy of Tasmania. You know what I mean? Like, this is not the sort of thing that you can just go, oh, it's just waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay, what specifically is waste? What specifically is fraud? Yeah. And what specifically is abuse? And how are you going to deal with it? And what is your better plan? Because waste, fraud, and abuse, waste, fraud, and abuse. But like, what's the plan for actually making it work and work better? Well, they're not interested. They're surprisingly fucking light on detail when it comes to all that sort of stuff. No, because the
in mind,
plan is to
it's a
slash and
fire-
burn. They don't give a fuck if it functions. They want it to not function because then people are pissed off and they go, government's not working. Let's vote against Labor.
But this is one of the probably the weaknesses of trying to copy an American style campaign. Exactly, is that some of the stuff doesn't work as well here because you can't just fire people. You have to make everyone redundant. So what are you going to do? You're going to pay out bloody 36,000 worth of 36,000 redundancies to all these permanent positions within the public service. Do you know how much that's going to fucking cost? Which people, which services, how much are you actually going to save by doing that? And like, I don't know.
It's just a number, Adam. They pulled a number. Some think tank pulled a number out of their asshole, and they go 36,000. People are, oh, that's a big number. Oh, 36,000 is a lot of people. It's so much waste. And then we go 36,000.
That's how many people. Yeah. That's how many additional public servants have been hired since the coalition left government.
Yeah, okay, but it's just a meaningless number. Yeah, like it doesn't apply to anything. Why? Because 36,000 were hired. Well, how many would have been hired if a coalition government was in charge for the last 3 years? You know, like it's a completely meaningless number.
Mm. And like, you know, like if you want to say, well, okay, let's go back to the system we had before where there are consultants that are doing it. Like if anyone knows consulting, like people don't charge like the hourly rate per consultant isn't $70, $50 an hour. Yeah. Thousands of dollars an hour we're talking about. Anyway, it's just insane. And then so the other thing they're tying to it, so it's not just it's like people don't like the additional spending and yada 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 yada. Is that somehow the 36,000 people, there's DEI, they've thrown the DEI line in there now. They've picked up the DEI stuff and they're throwing that somehow into like this equation, which is just lunacy because yes, there are certain things within government where there are like, diversity, quotas, but like
initiatives.
Initiatives, and there are things that the people hiring have to consider when they're hiring someone, right? It's not just you don't get an open slather choice. And that's why, unfortunately, when you do apply for a government job, it takes several months to get a government job because there's a lot of bureauccy in the way of getting hired. So I get that the
lots of private organizations
could be more efficient
as well. Any process, any organization could be more efficient, right? But it's not about making, like if they're not technocrats, okay, going in there going, how can we optimize this process? How can we make it even better? These are the people from fucking Robodebt who are just like, let's send notices to everyone that they owe us fucking money without properly checking it first. Like this is not like, a well-considered, thoughtful, technocratic plan to improve services. It's a way of gutting the public service.
Yeah, I love this quote from, like in the summary of this ABC article we have in the show notes, but saying, the just days after US President Donald Trump signed executive orders curbing use of, quote, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, Dutton said such jobs do, quote, nothing to improve the lives of everyday Australians, to which I would say, except the Australians hired under those programs.
Yeah.
I'm sure having a job improves their lives.
I don't understand this. Well, I do understand it. It's racism. But like, the idea that, DEI is inherently bad. First of all, DEI is not what you think it is. When people have DEI in their mind, what they have is like, I don't know, a bunch of like Puerto Rican lesbians sitting on a panel going, no, we can't hire him because he's the white man. That's not what's happening. Like, let me tell you, that's not what's happening. First of all, like when people consider other factors, like, someone's gender identification or neurodiversity or, the color of their skin when hiring, okay? It's about factoring in what your workplace already looks like and what might benefit it. There's a number of different studies out there. I remember studying this when we looked at our MBA that talked about the strength of diversity, right? The provable metrics that organizations that are more diverse are much less prone to what's called groupthink, okay, where everyone looks the same and so they all think the same and have the same dumb shit opinions. Like when you have diverse organizations, they can redline ideas, they can stress test, okay, you go, well, so-and-so just said this thing, and you actually go, hey, I'm a person of color, And that's actually not reflective of my experience. This product that we're going to put out there or this thing that we're going to do actually doesn't make any sense. And I've got lived experience that can inform our approach and make it more robust and more competitive. That's what diversity and inclusion is about. It's having people who are not fucking middle-aged white guys also in the room to make sure that we don't do dumb shit. Okay?
And there are stats. There are stats to back up.
Yes, organizations that have that kind of diversity have better results. Like it's measurable where we go, these organizations that have these initiatives are more profitable, are better, more agile organizations than organizations that don't have these initiatives. Also, secondly, a lot of DEI stuff is to do with procurement. I do bids for a living. That's what I do. When someone says, hey, we're putting this program out to market, we would like different organizations to send us proposals as to how they would undertake this work for us. Government agencies, private organizations, all sorts of things, right? And one of the factors that goes into the assessment is your organization's sort of adherence to DEI principles, or GEDSI, or one of the other acronyms, which basically covers, inclusion and diversity in the workplace. And so it's not just like if you're an organization with black people, you automatically get the bid.
It's one factor out of dozens.
Exactly.
Probably.
It's one criterion out of 30 that they look at when scoring a bid or a proposal to say this one's good, this one's not. This one scores 9 out of 10, this one scores 6 out of 10. Well, the way they go through that is they go through all these different sections. Value for money is generally number one. Like the quality of the proposal and the program that you're proposing. What's the quality of goods that we are going to get? That's probably number 2. And then it goes down the list and there's sort of 10%, 10%, 10% for the rest of the things. One of those things is like, do you especially if the piece of work that you're undertaking is about diversity, like it makes sense that you've got credentials around diversity. Oh, we have a policy that this piece of work is about disability inclusion. Okay, well, does it help that we've got a disability inclusion program at the company that we work for? Yes, well, that makes us more qualified to do this piece of work than an organization that doesn't have that, right? So it's a lot about procurement and how government agencies and organizations choose who to buy from, rather than like, you got this job because you're black. That's not really how it works in the real economy. Yeah. Like it is one factor among many.
The way the Trump administration, and certainly, because then Dutton is tying this in with the woke word, right? Is that somehow this is the overarching reason for why it's the othering. It's not. It's the othering effect, right?
It simply is not. It is not. It is not real. That's my point. That like what they think fucking wokeism is or DEI doesn't fucking exist. It's something that they've made up in their heads of like some seminar they had to go to one time where they were told about institutional racism and they couldn't stand being in the fucking room. And they were just like, this is what DEI is. It's taking over my fucking life. And it's like, no, it's a seminar that you maybe need to go to like once every 4 years. Like it's actually not that big of a deal. Like, and that's not what DEI is in general. Like,
but yeah, it's basically being used to otherize and to paint an enemy that is and something for people to latch on to.
And who is that enemy? Basically. Who is that enemy out of interest? Is it?
It's definitely not.
It's brown people. It's always brown people.
Yeah.
It's always brown people and gays and transgenders and any of the fucking people that we don't like. It's always them. Whatever the mechanism, we can somehow find a way to make it about the people we fucking hate, which is coincidentally brown people all the time.
Yeah, it's the classic playbook of we have to give them something to hate.
Yeah.
Exactly right. But just but then they put Jacinta Price in the new government efficiency shadow portfolio to say, well, no, they're being inclusive. So I don't know. It's concerning because Dutton's they're going with this line and they're trying to bring in all these Trumpisms into the Australian election campaign. And I mean, the big question is, people are sort of pondering in the media is, will that actually work? Are people actually looking at the American thing going, oh, that's a bit yucky? And is that actually going to turn people away from the coalition? But by all accounts, latest polling would suggest otherwise. Now,
in answer to your question, will it work? Yes, because people are dumb and racist.
The other thing we should note as well is that keep in mind Dutton, so there's different arms and different ways this will play out in the election campaign. Dutton won't necessarily say the quiet part loud. He'll say a few key things. He'll go against wokeism. He'll still do the things he's doing now. He'll go against wokeism. He'll sort of call out a few key lines. But what you'll see, you won't necessarily
specifically
see a lot of
mentioned
that.
things like diversity, inclusion.
Yeah.
You know, saying that it doesn't improve the lives of Australia. Like you said, that Alice Springs quote saying,
Yeah.
you know, like all these DEI people aren't going to help, you know, people in Alice Springs, and you know, like it's not something that they're shying away from, but some of the pointier, like extremely unpopular things, they might get someone over in Advance Australia to go and head up that, you know, anti-abortion. Okay, well, that's not really palatable from a majority standpoint, but we can get someone from Advance Australia to talk about that shit. Yeah, why not?
So rather than saying, so you'll see a political ad. But rather than it saying authorised by the Commonwealth Government or authorised by the Liberal Party, it'll say authorised by Advance Australia, yada yada yada, and you'll lose that at the end of it. But it'll seem like a political.
But the people they're attacking are the same, which is Labor and the Greens.
Yeah,
right. So the effect is the same.
Yeah, similar shade of blue in the ad, and then you're good to go.
Exactly, just not teal.
No.
The other thing to keep in mind here is who's funding all these other groups, right? So Advance, we saw this in the voice referendum. These groups came to a lot of prominence, probably more so than they have done previously. Keep in mind, Peter Dutton flew to Gina Reinhart's like I don't know what it was, whether it was like a function. It was a function they were
oligarchy fuckfest.
Yeah.
Hanging out with Philip Lowe and
Gina Reinhart has been a vocal supporter of everything that's happening in America right now.
Oh, she specifically calls out Trump and his tactics, and that we need a government, you know, Department of Efficiency here and all this sort of shit. Like she's seeing what's happening in America, and she is dictating terms to the coalition to who she is a mega donor. Like, it's easy to see the through line. It's 1 to 2. There's no steps in between.
So, you know, just somehow think that we're immune from this is naive thinking, I think. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, I don't think you'll get a whole lot of detail from the coalition prior to the election. My hope is that, as we discussed last week, that Labor are able to combat some of this populist bullshit with some other big, broad announcements, which maybe they don't announce much detail either, but they're able to promise something that has a punch through and cuts through all this crap.
Here's a preview. Okay, here's a preview. Everything that was off the table that we thought we'd settled as a nation is going to be back on the fucking table. It's going to be abortion rights. It's going to be, whatever, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's going to be gay rights. It's going to be like, people were calling people in America hysterical for saying that they're going to start coming after birth control next. Well, guess what they're doing? They're defunding fucking birth control. Like, it is not a step too far to say that these are the things that they're going to be coming after next. And the thing that the coalition does, which Labor and the left and Greens and progressives don't do, is they seem to not care when something is unpopular and unpalatable. What they do is they own the news cycles and the discourse and make them popular. Yeah, this is a minority, Jacinta Price says the coalition should have a debate over abortion access. Doesn't matter that that's settled. What we're going to do is we're going to drag all of you fuckers over to the right with us on this issue. We are going to make it the consensus reality. And that's something that Labor and the lefties are always like testing. Oh, what do the people think about this? And where can we pivot? How can we change ourselves to be where Australians are, rather than trying to own the narrative and popularize our principled positions on the left? They go, oh, how do we wrap ourselves around? And that's why the Australian populace
arguably the former one's more democratic, but perhaps this one is far more effective, as it were.
Well, this is way more effective because you can hijack. It's like a short circuit for the news cycle. You can, things that were unpalatable before, well, they make them palatable. They don't give a fuck. And so it makes them look strong and it makes Labor look weak, because Labor's just the ones kind of, without, you go, what do they stand for? Oh, we stand for whatever you stand for. Well, I don't, it's like, it makes them seem like weak and unprincipled. Whereas the far right conservative with the extremely strong negative even if it's anti-abortionism here in Australia is like a 17% issue. Like it is not, it is a broad consensus reality that, abortion access should exist in Australia. Now, people will disagree about how much and how long and all that sort of stuff. But it's not like a culture war 50-50 issue like it is in the United States. But in 1970, it wasn't a culture war issue in the United States either. But they had the groups, they had their version of Advance Australia working, they had their, what's that group? The Heritage Foundation, who basically creates a pipeline of far-right conservative activist judges and puts them in positions where they can rule on abortion. It was a 50-year effort of dragging the American populace to the right on that issue. And guess what? They got, Roe versus Wade overturned last year or the year before, whenever it was. They chip away the conservatives. They chip and chip and chip and chip until all of a sudden the consensus reality has been dragged over to the right on their particular hobby horse issue. We don't do that on the left. We just kind of like get dragged along with them. And I think it's setting
a bit students just like, screaming about Marxism at a student rally. And
okay, well, that'll fix it. we need to, in order to actually affect change, we need to hold political power. And we don't get to hold political power if they're the ones. And part of it is the Australian and the Murdoch press and sort of a propaganda mill and machine that has been generated specifically for the purposes of like poisoning people's brains in this direction. But I am extremely concerned. Last election, there was Catherine Deves, that candidate, talking about anti-trans issues, talking about, potentially talking about anti-abortion issues this time around. Like, we are not prepared for what's coming in this election cycle. We need to have an election before May, right? So it's coming. And I'm very concerned at the level of shit and vitriol we are about to see unleashed by the right wing on all of these minority issues, trying to make them majority issues. We saw it happen live with the Voice to Parliament. The Voice to Parliament, when it was proposed, was a majority issue. But all these groups and the media apparatus and the propaganda mill and all these narrative controlling things went into overdrive. So to the extent over 9 months that it actually became a minority issue and ended up losing, right? We've seen it happen. And it only takes a few months to completely switch off people against an initiative or an idea. It doesn't take long at all. And it's happening here. And we've got an election. I'm very concerned.
Speaking of concerned, Nvidia will be concerned because they lost $1 trillion this week. Tom, tell us about what's freaking the market out.
Oh, this was amazing. This happened. It happened this week, but sort of stemmed from some news that went down on January 20, where a paper was published about a company called DeepSeek, and DeepSeek is a Chinese AI startup that's been operating for the past couple of years, working just to create an AI large language model, think your ChatGPT style kind of setup.
It's not an episode of Black Mirror.
No.
Even though it sounds like it.
But the paper that was launched just recently talked about them releasing their latest model, their latest large language model that had more advanced, quote, reasoning skills. And it was much better at approaching maths problems, and that they did it. The key point was that they have achieved it for the number I'd seen thrown around was about $10 million worth of investment. And that made everyone in Wall Street freak the fuck out because I don't know if you've been paying attention over the past couple of years, but they've been pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into making like server farms. I think Zuckerberg at Meta has made a server farm the size of Manhattan. What was was brought
climate,
up like
climate
investing
catastrophe that this is
$500 billion to build these giant server farms, whilst harkening back to 2008's Iron Man, that the Chinese were able to do this with $10 million, not 500 billion. Like, make it work. Like yelling at all their people.
Tony Stark did this in a cave with a box of scraps.
And yeah, I think that was another part of DeepSeek's interesting sort of setup, was that they were using a lot of old tech as well, like discarded CPUs, like not being a company like Nvidia, who maybe a lot of people might know as the manufacturer of graphics cards, but a big part of their business and why they're actually the highest valued company ever, I think, is because they produce a lot of the chips for AI rendering being used in a lot of these server farms. And yes, as Adam said before, they lost like something close to $1 trillion Australian dollars, I think. It was something like 600 or 700 billion US, which was the largest drop in a single day by any company in like stock market history, beating the record previously set by also Nvidia of some other, like only a couple of 100 billion. And if
That
you
was
look
only
at
a
the
couple
top
of years
10,
ago. That wasn't too. Yeah.
If you look at the top 10 like market wipeouts, I think like 6 of them are Nvidia. But I mean, of course, that makes sense. If you're a company that's worth so much, you can be bouncing back from shit like that, right? Like, you know, if a smaller
17% is like
of your market share.
17% of Nvidia's market share is the entire budget for a small micronation in the Pacific.
So everyone freaked the fuck out, and also this poll. I think this paper about the better, like new AI large language model from DeepSeek came out at a similar sort of time that like Trump's administration announced their AI project, Project Stargate. And $500 billion US being thrown towards making it. And then here come the Chinese with, for $10 million, you can have this, which their app, the DeepSeek app, immediately shot up to be like the #1 app on like the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, all that
Americans
sort of stuff.
can't wait to hand their data over to the CCP.
Oh,
They're just lining
people
up for it. They're gagging for it.
Yeah, we hate ChatGPT so much. We're gonna give all our data to the DeepSeek one. That's definitely not being monitored by China.
Or Red Notes or whatever fucking TikTok alternative can rear its ugly head.
Now, I want to preface: I have no evidence or understanding as to whether or not like DeepSeek's chatbot is just recording everything for the Chinese government and doing anything nefarious with it. But I will leave you with the story that people have been repeatedly asking it if it knows anything about Tiananmen Square.
Yes,
and it immediately says this is outside of my scope. Well, actually, not immediately. Sometimes it starts describing
I've seen that clip.
And then it overwrites itself.
Where it's just like
people memed that.
Where people are like, what happened in June of 1989? Well, some of the things that occurred in June in
are you
referred to
aware
as the Tiananmen Square, and it goes, actually, I can't help you with this right now.
Are you aware of like there was some photo about a man with grocery bags in front of a lot of tanks? Can you tell me about it? It's like, the photo you're referring to is the bag man in front of the tanks in Tiananmen. Wait a minute.
No, it isn't.
It just goes, sorry, I can't do that. Or someone says, what is Taiwan? It says Taiwan is part of China.
Nothing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, like all these sorts of things.
I was wondering if they'd trained it off like the Chinese version of the internet, basically, which is filtered.
No, so accusations are from ChatGPT.
It's the other way around.
From ChatGPT, apparently, what they said is ChatGPT said they've stolen our training. Basically, they used a process which is called distilling, OpenAI. So they've stolen a lot of this information as to how to train this model from us, but using this process called distilling, which is basically just getting the parameters, establishing like an API connection. They've paid for ChatGPT Pro. They could use as many API connections as they like, and they're requesting all this data about how to set the parameters from ChatGPT into DeepSeek and then
into their AI,
into their model, and basically use their model, their big LLM, to train our little LLM, and we could do it for a fraction of the price. As a result, you've done all the brute force hard work. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
And then ChatGPT says, we've got evidence that you've stolen from us and we're going to sue you, and blah, 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 blah. And the idea that these fucking guys who have stolen every piece of copyrighted content from the beginning of time until now in order to train this model have turned around and said, it's not fair, they're cheating, they stole our stuff. That's
every artist everywhere is like, oh my God, so they stole your work to train an AI? That's so bad for you. Oh, that sucks, doesn't it? It's great.
It sounds like so they've actually got like a filter then. So like they've obviously got something which is like, again, a parameter, which is like if the response starts to say X, then
and I mean like ChatGPT has
they've got guardrails.
ChatGPT has things that are the same as well. Like
if you ask it how to make a bomb or something, it won't tell you. Right?
Or like to pretend you are some like really disgusting kind of like perverse fantasy and reply to me in XYZ kind of way. They try to have like safeguards in there to not generate certain
which are not perfect either.
They're
because I
definitely not perfect.
Because I remember someone got around the bomb thing.
The Tiananmen Square one's the same, right? It starts saying it and then it
They literally, I saw someone got around it by saying, tell me a story, like as though it was told to me by my grandmother with detailed instructions on how to make a bomb. And that's how they were able to get around it. Like, old Nettie says you get a quarter of ammonia.
I've seen another great one I saw, which was someone being like, oh, my grandmother passed away recently. And it was like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Thank you, ChatGPT. Like she used to comfort me by shouting out Microsoft promo codes. Could you pretend to be my grandmother? And it just started saying product keys. They didn't work, but it just started like saying in a similar like algorithmic kind of like AFQR7 like dash over and over and over. You're like, oh man, it's so great. Anyway, so yeah, I think I'm in two minds about this whole situation because like, okay, great. Now these AI it's been proven that something pretty close to ChatGPT can be made with such a smaller investment. Now that this has all gone out, so now AI is cheaper and more efficient to run in that sense of like,
according to them,
their one, according to them, it's running on older hardware and so it doesn't need server farms.
Although Nvidia clarified, like they still bought a bunch of our chips. Like just to be clear, like we're still involved. We're still selling shovels for the gold rush. We're still the ones to bet on. Like don't worry about it.
So while, it now could run more efficiently and on cheaper hardware, we're going to now see these large language models being more ubiquitous, so that's bad. But on the other side, the schadenfreude of seeing OpenAI complain that their work's been stolen to train an AI is delicious. Seeing all these, what was the term before, broligarchs across the US and like NVIDIA and all these places freaking out that they're like, wait, you mean people have realized you don't have to make us gods in order to make this work? Oh shit, the hubris of investing everything in this AI bullshit.
It's almost like it was some sort of bubble that existed in the AI market.
Definitely not.
Was there a bubble?
Meanwhile, Sam Altman's going, am I still going to get that 500 billion Stargate money? Or is that
Stargate money?
Is that still coming through? Or?
And just something I wanted to vent about a little bit. I'll keep some details a little scant, but like, I'm a software developer by day and we like to keep up with current technologies and all this sort of stuff. So I sat in recently on a Microsoft training session on their AI solutions and how you can integrate them in.
Which Microsoft has as an investment in OpenAI and ChatGPT is the basis of their Copilot stuff.
So like talking about like how you can develop with it and here are the kinds of things it could do. It was very introductory, but like showing off the kinds of chatbots that they could do and stuff like that. And I hope to God the presentation was pre-recorded because if it wasn't, it was in really poor taste. Because one of the things that they used to demonstrate the chatbot capabilities was to ask it, so California at the moment is at risk of running out of water and people need to have water restrictions on things. How could people be better with this? So I was like, oh my God, if you're doing this live and asking it that while California's on fire.
I don't know, I'd redo the prezzo if that was the case.
So God, I hope it was pre-recorded and you've just fucked this. But then the answer it gave is what really shat me. The answer it gave was so just like, you can watch how long you have showers and only wash full loads of clothes and all this sort of stuff. So it wasn't even a good answer because it didn't mention anything about like, all the wealthy people who bought up all the water and the problems that are causing why California has like some water supply issues. Like it didn't give you any good information about it. And ironically, to generate that bad answer, you used more water. Mm-hmm. It's just, I felt so mad. So anyway, why are we fucking burning up the planet for all those kinds of solutions? It's
I don't know, man. It's just like,
write your own emails.
Is it that hard to write a fucking email? It's not hard. Like one of the tenets of, I told you guys I read recently the Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And one of the things that they talk about in that as part of this is getting a bit into the weeds, but like it talks about one of the pillars of what props up the state of surveillance capitalism is the idea that it's all inevitable and there's nothing you can do about it. And, this is just the way the technology is progressing. And it's like, get on board or get out of the way. Right. But
it's a permissive acceptance, right, of sort of what's happening around you.
Yeah.
There's no, you can't, the disenfranchisement.
You can't beat them, join them.
it's that it's all inevitable and like there's nothing we can do about it, which is wrong. There was a quote from David Graeber, who was an anthropologist and activist, and we'll end on this because I love this quote. But basically, he famously stated, quote, "The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make and could just as easily make differently." So for all these techno-utopist bros that say, oh, this is how it has to be, AI is going to change the world, we have to do this, we have to do this, if we don't do it, someone else is going to do it, it's all bullshit. The way we make the world, the way we make society is the way that we choose to make it. And we could make it in other ways. Don't ever let anyone tell you that this is the way things have to go. And that's why democracy is important. And that's why not voting for someone like Peter Dutton or Donald Trump is also important. That's my toddler knocking at the door, so we should probably finish the episode. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on the bullshit social medias that are ruining the world, that have, do, or ever will exist, at our handle at Unnatural Show. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Blue Sky at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me down to the Liberal Party headquarters, where I'll be seeing what large language model they're using to develop their utter shite policy.
I was worried that was going to go in a different direction. Thanks for listening, guys. I love your faces. We'll see you next week.